barnesandnoble.com. I am really happy to be here today and talk with one of my favorite authors, Carlos Hernandez. Hey, Carlos, how you doing?
I am doing great. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just, staying put, trying not to get sick, trying to stay
Exactly.
well.
Sheltering in
Right.
place, wearing a mask, doing all the right things, right?
All that good stuff. Yeah, yeah. So Carlos and I, we are here because Barnes and Noble is doing a really cool thing. They have taken Carlos's book, Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe, and it's their book of the month. So it's on special, and they have their own exclusive edition of your book. Did you ever think you would have your own exclusive Barnes and Noble edition of a book you wrote?
No, no, this is the thing that happens. It's ridiculous. And so, Sal and Gabby Break the Universe Now came out like a year ago, and I guess know enough about publishing to know like what the shelf life of things is, but I didn't think a year from now it would be like, oh, and now we're going to feature it, and the wheel just keeps on turning. So I'm very, very grateful that Break the Universe has this special cover and this feature at Barnes and Noble, and Fix the Universe is out also too in hardcover. But yeah, if you get the one at Barnes and Noble, it's an exclusive cover that has sort of like a swirly hole in the universe in the center.
I
Quite
know
cool.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that cover.
Yeah.
So, for people who are not familiar with Sal and Gabby yet, those poor souls, they need to be familiar with it because it's great. But we'll give them a little background. I thought maybe just talk a little bit about how you and I met. So, a few years back now, I was reading as I do, and I came across this great collection of short stories, The Assimilated Cuban's Guide to Quantum Santeria. And I read it and I was like, this, it just blew my mind. It was like the abundance of just zany creativity there. It was like, I don't know, I describe it as like sort of a Cuban influenced a series of Black Mirror stories. It's so cool. So when we were doing the imprint, Rick Riordan presents, and we wanted to kind of highlight authors telling stories from their own cultures and just going their own directions. You were one of the very first people I thought of. I told Stephanie, my editor, we really need to find Carlos and see if he wants to write a middle grade book. And so take it from there. Can you talk about like where did Sal and Gabby come from, and
Yeah.
how did you get to that story?
So first, I want to tell you what I've been telling people for a year. Um, I don't get to win lotto because you found me. Like there is no reason I can think of for that little book to have appeared in your hands. Like somehow Rick Riordan read my short story collection. It wasn't even for middle grade, so like I didn't know like what your reading habits were. Now I know that you read widely and all sorts of things. But why should Rick Riordan do that? And so the first thing you did, I don't know if you remember, you gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, and that was already enough to turn my eyes to saucers and be like, Rick Riordan gave me a 5-star review on Goodreads, and a long one too. Helped sales. And then it's published by a small press called Rosarium. And
Yeah,
Rosarium was doing an Indiegogo drive, like many
yeah.
small presses do, in order to be able to survive. And you supported that so wonderfully. Folks out there, like this is how nice a person Rick Riordan is. Not only did he give Rosarian $10,000 to help run its press for the year, but he made it a matching grant and used it as an advertising tool to then raise another 10,000 to put it over the finishing line and make the Indiegogo. That's why that press still exists today because it had that push at the right time to be able to do that. So thank you so much for supporting indie presses, Rick Riordan, wonderful person that you are.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and then I'm not done complimenting you yet. And then you pass, Assimilated Cubans Guide on to Stephanie Lurie, quite argue, or not really arguably, the best editor who's out there anywhere. Steph is so
Absolutely.
great. And so she took me out for a Cobb salad over here on 42nd Street, right behind the New York Public Library. I think it's called the Bryant Park Cafe or whatever. I'd never been there. I'm not that fancy. But Steph took me out and we had Cobb salads, and she was like, "Well, do you have an idea that you could, maybe pitch to Rick Riordan Presents?" And so what I did is I took my two favorite characters from the Assimilated Cubans Guide to Quantum Santeria, an adult Salvilon who was an entanglement physicist in that story, and Gabby Riel, who is a reporter of the Cryptozoological. She has several adventures in the Assimilated Cubans Guide, different stories where it's she's delving into fantasy and science fiction as an intrepid reporter. My two favorite characters I've ever written by far. So I was like, well, what if I put them in the same middle school in Miami? And that's how it started, and it's just been going since then.
Oh my gosh! And the story is incredible. I don't even know how to reduce it to anything because it's just so
I have trouble
multifaceted.
too.
It's not really something you can easily describe, but it's something you can easily love. You get into it, and immediately these characters, the school. Oh my gosh! Can you talk a little bit about their middle school and why I can't go there because it's such a great school?
You could have taught there, though. I mean, I know your history as a teacher, and you would have been welcomed as a teacher of English and history at Culeco. But so one of the, I did several things when I was writing Silent Gabby that I wanted to sort of like push against things that I was seeing in some middle grade, and one of them are that schools are terrible and they treat kids terribly, and teachers are terrible and they treat kids terribly, and principals are terrible and they treat kids terribly. That just wasn't my experience. My experience was that teachers were really caring and hardworking. I had fabulous public school teachers, K to 12, and I had principals that I knew and were very good friends in some cases, and so like I remember Mr. Gray to this day very fondly from my K through 5 education, and so I wanted to create the school I wanted to see and that more matched my experience of education to give kids something to hope for. Because, it might be that you end up in a school situation that isn't great for a few years, but things can transform rapidly the next couple of years if you go to a different school, and you likely will if you, are in the public school education system, for instance. So Culeco is basically sort of like if Comic Con met public education, basically, it's basically like that's fair because, and I literally thought that because I was like, people go to Comic Con and they pile into these rooms and they listen to lectures. Like they are lectured to in an educational setting, but what are they learning about? They're learning about their favorite stars. They're learning about how movies get made. They're learning about comics and graphics and books and all this other stuff. See, that's education too, except at Comic Con, people are paying out the wazoo and standing in long lines and taking lectures by the thousands in order to do it. So it's like education and Comic Con very closely together, mixed together, but the spirit is so different. I want our educational system to more resemble Comic Con.
Yeah, no kidding. That sounds really good. I think I'd attend school more often than I did probably. And you get costumes too. You have some great costumes in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a character, Aventura, who is basically sort of like the cosplayer par excellence. She's an expert seamstress, and in Fix the Universe, the book that follows Break, she is in charge of doing a version of the Alice in Wonderland stories, and so she's putting everybody in a costume in the entire school, and is kind of losing her mind a little bit from all the work that she has to do.
So the plot, starting with Break the Universe, which is the first, and then I don't know how you did it, but Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe is even better. It's an amazing sequel, and that's not easy to do. But starting with Break the Universe, so if I could sort of give a teaser, I guess I would say Sal discovers that he has the ability to pull things from other universes into his own. And so I'm thinking about how much trouble I would have gotten into in middle school had I discovered I could do that. He can even pull people from other universes into our own. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, is that something like wish fulfillment you've always wanted to be able to do, or where did that come from?
Oh, I think it's a very human desire to be like thinking about, well, the latest metaphor we have for this kind of idea is the multiple universe. But there
Mhm.
have been, the ideas of other places and other portals that we can use to go to alternate lands. And we have fairies granting wishes. We have genies granting wishes. We have lots of traditions all over the world that talk to this desire of being able to somehow exceed our reality and get the stuff we need when we need it. So, in Sal's case, chapter 1 of Break the Universe, what he really needs is a chicken here.
Yay, the chicken.
Oh my God, Rick, I have so many chickens now. I'm doing all these school visits. This one, I've been trying to learn how to play. I don't know if you've seen the videos of the guy who does Fur Elise, but he's like, they're much harder to play than he makes. So I think that guy's a genius. Anyway, that desire to get stuff from other universes or other realities and to have some kind of power that is on your side that you don't maybe understand fully, but is helping you when you need it most because life is so darn hard.
Yeah.
That's ancient, and so that's when we talk about the sort of like mythological side of Sal and Gabby, I didn't use a mythology per se, but I definitely tapped into those mythological urges that we have. And so Sal loses his mom. He can't abide a universe where he's lost his mom, so he's gonna get another from another universe, and that's where that desire and that idea came from.
Yeah, and I think that's really relatable. I mean, we've all sort of, if anybody who's had to deal with grief, knows about that. That you sort of want to bargain. You go through that phase where surely there's a way where there's another reality that things worked out differently. And I'm curious. I mean, you've already talked about that, and you've talked about sort of the aspect of wanting to show a school that's more positive than negative. Were there other things that when you thought about writing for a middle grade audience that were sort of forefront in your mind, things that you wanted to relate through Sal and Gabby?
Yeah. So one of the big ones is the family that you choose is just as valid as the family that you're born with. The family that we acquire through life is just as wonderful and loving and gorgeous as those families that are biological. That they're very equal, and sometimes our society doesn't treat it that way. So, one of the really important characters is the character who's called American Stepmom.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy, but Sal early on, he's grieving over the loss of his mother. This fiance to his dad comes and says, I don't want to replace your mom, but maybe I can be your American stepmom. And Sal, like, so American stepmom, I like the sound of that. And they are wonderful family together. He loves his American stepmom, and she's great. She's funny and smart, and she's the one he turns to when he has a problem to solve. So, basically you can see that Sal has a great support network. His dad loves him to death, and, basically is working using his knowledge of physics to try to help Sal manage this unbelievable power, and at the same time keep him safe from people who might want to do, him harm or eliminate him from other things if his power is discovered. So he's, dancing a delicate dance as well. And so Gabby on her side has at least 8 stepdads that we know about. So Gabby, she has a menagerie of dads. And they all have.
She has a lot of dads.
Yeah,
Can you?
does.
Where did that come from? Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, it's like one of my favorite things because I know that like when I went there's a very specific thing I can talk about. I don't think I've talked about this in an interview before. When I went to Cuba in 1997 as part of an educational cultural exchange, I was there for 21 days at the University of Havana, and I had 3 days where I was able to take a weekend and spend it with the family that I'd never met there. So, the embargo basically made travel very difficult. There were only a few reasons why you could go over, but education is one of them. So, I jumped at the chance to do the cultural exchange, and then I got to meet my family. And I walked in, and they've never met me. They'd seen pictures. We'd had these grainy conversations on the phone, and we'd had some letters, some pictures, but they'd never met me. How are they going to treat me? Well, let me tell you, the second I walked through that first door, I was insta family. I was instantly enveloped. And so this was in Candel, which is right outside of a seaside resort town called Baradero. And I mean, the town was basically taken over with my mother's side of the family. All the Suarezes ever lived everywhere in Cantel, this small little town. And so I would hop from house to house, drinking tons of espresso to keep myself awake, and met everybody and hugged everybody and heard all their stories and played with kids. And it was incredible. And it
Wow.
was just instantly, like one of these life-changing moments where, the family that I'd never been able to hold or touch or really even get to know in an intimate kind of way didn't matter. I was instantly enveloped. And that's what I wanted Gabby's dads to feel like. These people who come in and just love you for who you are, and the love is infinite and powerful and full of humor, and they are just there to love and be happy together.
Mm. Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that a lot of people have talked about your books, something that they really love, and my gosh, you've gotten so many starred reviews and so much great attention for this, rightly so. But people talk about just the sheer kindness that you bring, and how you meet these characters, and they're really so human and so compassionate, and there's none of this sort of good and evil sort of dichotomy, really. It's just a bunch of humans trying to be kind and figure out life together, and that's such a nice, refreshing thing. So I don't know if I have a question on that, but I do want to point out that the book also won the Pura Belpré Award from the American Library Association. Can you tell us about that? And congratulations.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's this major award that it won, and I didn't even know I was being considered. I had no clue. I was at my friend Fran Wiles' house. So Fran, also a great writer, she won the Nebula this year for her middle grade book Riverland.
Yeah.
I was at Fran's house in Philadelphia for no like reason except we were just like visiting and whatever. And I was literally peeling shrimp in her sink for dinner. So I was peeling shrimp. Phone call. Don't really recognize. Uh, Hello. Uh, I'm sorry. What? I, I won the Buddha Belpre, and then it's like holding. I don't want the phone to slip because I've got these shrimpy hands that I'm holding onto my phone with, and it's just like, what? And Fran and Claire are like, what's going on? What's happening? What? And so like it was wonderful to be with Claire and my good friend Fran to receive this award, but it's bolt out of the blue, and it was just such an honor. We just had the ceremony online a few weeks ago where I was able to give my speech and just basically say thank you for 10 minutes because it is just overwhelmingly wonderful to be recognized in that kind of way.
Oh, yeah. And that gold sticker sure looks nice on the
Yeah.
book,
Oh, I have
too.
to tell you, Rick, my big sister Maria, who basically is responsible for my love of reading, and she every book she had I stole, and so what she said to me is like, Carlos, you got a gold sticker? And I said, yeah, the Buddha Belfry, they put a gold sticker on. She's like, I would have read you. I made a point of reading every book in the library that had a sticker on it. Like
Right?
her winnowing process. So she would have read me. And I have to tell you, it's like, I've gotten a lot of wonderful people telling me things, but that one is really close to my heart because she would have read me when she's the one who inspired me to be such an avid reader.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so cool. And so I know one thing we haven't talked about a lot, you and I, and I'm really curious about this. And I know a lot of readers out there are also writers of one kind or another. Um,
Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? I mean, how do you come into a project like this, and what was your process like?
Yeah. And so, a project like this is a little different than something that is completely free form because, when you have a major, publisher saying, hey, got any ideas, you come prepared in a slightly different kind of way. But a lot of times it's long showers for me. With long showers, ideas start to float. Reading that I've done starts to coalesce. For Claire, my wife, it's walks, so I think we might have different
Yeah.
ways of getting into whatever theta wave state is required for that kind of thinking. But for me, it's definitely like showers and thinking about different ideas and trying to think like, well, what's a story I haven't seen before? What is an idea that I haven't seen explored enough of, or what's a twist on an idea that has been eating at me. And then usually I require one sentence that feels poetic and potentiating for me. And that for me, in Sal and Gabby Break the Universe, one of the first ideas I had was this metaphor of the universe as a beneficent giant that Sal was sleeping on, and he could speak to it in Spanish and it would grant him wishes. So like I had this image of sort of like the multiverse being personified inside of this giant who cared about Sal, and that's how he saw it, and that was the metaphor that he uses when he needs to do his brain surfing. When he needs to basically start navigating the multiverse, he thinks of that. He gives a different metaphor for Gabby because Gabby, is just a different person, and so together they decide that riding the taco is what they're going to do. And there's a long story beside that. It doesn't make sense right now, but it makes sense if you read the book. But basically, they go taco riding in order to jump the universe because that's what works for Gabby.
I love it. So are you a outliner? Do you plot beforehand, or do you just sort of go right in? How do you do that?
The eternal question: plotter versus pantser, right?
Yes.
I would say I pants first and outline later. So with Fix the Universe, for instance, I created an outline after my third draft. So basically, I feel like that gives me the opportunity to do the best of both worlds. I want a highly structured story that is taking good care of the reader, and so I don't want a meandering, remembrances of things past, Proustian, in endless novel. But at the same time, there are things that you learn in writing that I didn't want to, foreshorten by outlining too much in the beginning. So in this process, I think people can outline beautifully and do the same things, poetically that I do. But for me, I find more poetry in pantsing and more structure in outlining. And so pants first, then outline.
Makes total sense to me. But three drafts before you outlined.
Oh, Rick, I threw out
Interesting.
more than 100,000 words before you even got to like the one that I
Wow.
turned into stuff. Yeah, and she read some of them too, and that so like I believe in writing. I believe in writing as the process, and for me, it's a going through. It's not. I'm not a fast writer. I think you're much faster and much better in a lot of ways. I'm not fast, but when I get there, I like where I end up. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be a little slower than other writers because I want to discover as I go.
Well, yeah, you should like where you end up because you end up in a pretty amazing place. So,
Well, but so do you, and different writers just do it different ways.
oh
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's total. That's why it's so fun to talk about because nobody has the same process. But I think every author, every writer I know would agree that there's no perfect first draft. That's just not possible. Yeah, there are multiple drafts before you get anywhere close to something that you'd want somebody to read.
yeah, and it's funny too because sometimes you'll end your writing day and you'll be like, I'm a genius. That was so great. And then you go back the next day and it's like, dude.
Yeah.
Start again. It's that sort of like fog of writing, kind of like the fog of war. It's just like you could really be in a very different state when you're writing than when you're reading.
That's very true. Yeah. Anytime I get to that point where I think, wow, I'm a genius, I know I'm in trouble. That's not true.
You,
So,
me, same.
so let's turn that to kids that want to write. I mean, you have done a lot of school visits now, and you've talked to a lot of kids, and a lot of them are interested in telling their own stories. What
Yeah.
advice do you give them?
So first of all, I would say we are all better writers than we get credit for. I want to really start there, and it's 1000% the truth. We are so used to saying, oh, this is bad, or this is no good, or whatever, or this isn't as good as blah. That's a terrible way to limit the art that gets produced in the world. And I want an abundance of art in this world. We're all storytellers. What comes out of our mouth every day is story. We are constantly telling stories to each other. We're creating narratives. We know how to do it because we know how to use language. And language is based around telling stories. So you already know a heck of a lot about telling stories. And this is evidenced by the stories that I've read that middle graders and fifth graders and fourth graders have given to me. And they're full of heart and humor, and I just love them. So start there by believing, and then trust the process. You won't end up the first time you write with this perfect shining thing that is going to, circulate around the world and change everyone's lives. But you might on the fifth draft, after you start, thinking about what you want to do, being in conversation with people that you trust about art. The thing is, like, writing is a process, and you are in an active communication. It's impossible to predict what people are going to say because every individual person is going to have a slightly different reaction, and then you have to decide, well, which reactions are the ones that I'm going to value at this moment. Do I want to write this story for people like me? So if you're writing a story for kids, it might be different, than if you're writing a story for adults. And thinking about audience in that way is actually really helpful for doing it. So have the courage to write, do it, and trust yourself that the things that please you as you're writing are going to please other people. But then also trust the process. And the process is basically write stuff down, share it, get input, make changes, make a better version.
Mm. Rejections? Did you have to deal with a lot of those?
Oh, never. Did you? Oh, no. I mean, seriously. Yeah. Rejection is interesting. I have come to see that rejection is helpful when I remember it, but it never makes it easy in the moment. So, I have a story on submission right now. And, like, twice a day, I'm like, do they read it yet? Do they love me? Am I actually a writer? Like, all of those same feelings still exist. Having written, however, and having known rejection, I can tell you that, a story that was rejected 13 times found a home at 14, and I can tell you that the story that I didn't think was one of my strongest is one of the ones that's gotten the most play in terms of reprints and stuff like that. And so you never quite know what the world is going to like. So what you do is you write first for yourself. You are your first audience and your best audience, because even if someone never buys your story or you never get it published, you still will have learned a heck of a lot by going through the writing process. And that learning will not benefit you only as a writer, but as a person, as a human being, and as a person who is involved and knowledgeable about the world.
Yeah, well said. Well, so last question, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about is other writers, and who are you reading? Who do you love? So when do you have authors that really were formative to who you are now and really inspired you when you were young or more recently? And do you have authors that you'd recommend to young readers?
Yeah. So let me just say that I think Diana Wynne Jones is somebody that I
Mhm.
discovered late in life, and I wish I
Mhm.
had known earlier in life, because then I could have been rereading her for a long time. And so Diana Wynne Jones is a huge, like, recent influence, and influenced Sal and Gabby quite a bit. In terms of, like, something that I read a long time ago that really was important, Bless Me Ultima, by
Oh,
Rodolfo Anaya, is magic that you can hold in your hand. It is just this incandescent work of fiction. Basically, the relationship between a kid and his abuela, and it is just par excellence middle grade magical realism. And it was soul opening. It's like, oh, I can do that, because it sounded a lot like my experience in different ways, but it also gave permission, like, in a really important way. As an adult, I'm reading a lot of adult sort of things. And so right now I'm reading Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, and I'm learning new things on every page. And I love reading nonfiction like this. And so it is a gorgeous piece of science writing, just super elegantly written and wise, and also really scientific. So those of you who are looking for an adult read, it's a great book by a master writer. Lots of different suggestions. I mean, I'd be remiss, if I didn't say Paula Santiago is coming out
oh yeah.
very, very
Oh,
soon now, just any day.
yeah.
I was given the honor of reading it in advance and blurbing it. And so let me tell you, like, it is great. I think it has 4 stars already in the previews, and
It's
it is just going to be another beautiful Rick Riordan Presents story. Thank you, Rick, for making this imprint possible.
Oh gosh, it's a pleasure. Yeah, that's coming out, and you can learn about all the other imprints as well, and Carlos's books on readriordan.com. But just want to send out one last plug for Sal and Gabby, Break the Universe, the book of the month from Barnes and Noble, exclusive edition. You can buy it 24/7 on bnn.com. Carlos, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you for everything, but thank you for this conversation too.
You betcha. All right, take care, everybody.